All right, so I want to talk to you about what we have left. All right, so we have 2 pieces of fabric left. You have the plain blue. The plain blue is the back. All right, I'm going to set that to the side. All right, these firework design is what we have for our flange for the front of the pillow, okay? Because we wanted, you know, kind of wanted it to look, you know, festive in a sense. And again, I'm going to do the loops or the scroll quilting on this. All right, I just think it finishes up nice. So if you read the flange, you need 4 pieces, 2.5 inches wide. And there's 2 that are 18.5 and 2 that are 22.5. All right. So if you measure this fabric is about 20 inches, right? Just like the red fabric. So if I do a 2.5 inch strip and another 2.5 inch strip, that should be enough for me to get an 18 out of one side and the 20 or the 22 out of the other side. So I think we could do this with 2 widths of fabric. All right. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to trim this fabric, and I want to cut a 2.5 inch piece. So I'm actually going to cut mine a little bit bigger than 2.5 to start, and then I'm going to trim it down because of the fact that I have this edge here that has been ripped, right? Because I want to get one out of here. And I'm going edge to edge, you know, the width of fabric. So there's one that I cut out, but I'm going to trim it up in a second. And while I have this straight edge here, I'm going to measure over 1, 2.5, and I'm going to cut my next one. And I'm just making sure that I have it 2.5 all the way down. All right, now you do have a little bit of extra fabric, all right, just in case, but I really think you should be able to get them both out of just 2 widths of fabric. So I flipped that one around because, again, I like to always cut on the same side of the blade. And I'm right-handed, so I flipped it around. So now I just want to trim off this edge here that's been ripped. So I get a true 2.5 inch strip of fabric. All right, so there we go. So here are my 2 pieces. And I look here. All right. If I kind of ignore the selvage, I need 22.5. So if I take this to 22.5, pretending the selvage isn't there, I go to here. And then I think if I lay this one down and measure it, again without the selvage, here's my 18.5. You have about 2 extra inches. Okay, on a width of fabric. So you should only need 2 of these to do both the inner and the outer borders. All right, I'm going to do the same thing with these as I did with the red. This one border that has the white on it, I am going to trim that off. I don't want to use that in any way towards my measurements or lining up the fabric when I go to attach it to my pillow. So I'm just going to trim off this one edge. And that's the edge I'll start with when I lay down the fabric to actually quilt it. All right, so I have these 2 pieces ready to go. Well, now I need my batting, and my batting needs to be 2 inches. All right, now I'm probably only going to be able to load up a design on my machine that is 2 by 10. I don't think I might be able to get the 12 in there, but probably not. I did the last one as a 10 inch. I'm probably going to just do a 10 inch again. So if you don't have batting that is as long as this in one piece, it's no big deal. We can do exactly what Kim did. And we would be subcutting our batting like every 10 inches. All right, so if you want to do that, you can. The other thing is, if you have a long piece of batting, you could cut it all the way off at 2 inches all the way down, and make the batting as long as the strip is. It's up to you. All right, so I'm going to leave that up to you on how you would like to actually cut your batting to go behind this flange. And again, I just think the batting makes the flange like pop. It gives it some stability. It gives it a little bit of support underneath, and makes it really look nice and like not as flimsy. I guess that's my word. All right, so I cut my batting at like 2 1/8, and I have my 2.5 inch strips. I loaded up on my embroidery machine a 2 by 10 scroll design. You can kind of see it up there. All right. And I just stitched out, and I can only do 2. It's possible I could have fit a 3rd in here, but that doesn't help because you still have to do 4. So I'm just going to do these 2 long strips because, like I said, I didn't trim the long strips. All right, so I have my 2 rectangles, and the first thing that it stitches out is, hey, where to put my batting? So I'm just going to take my batting and lay it up here, and it's going to tack it in place. I'm going to hit start and let it start tacking this first one down. And I did kind of put my designs on one part of the hoop, so I have some stabilizer like on this side that could be left to put in like a smaller hoop, you know, because I do have some smaller hoops to use. So it's just stitching down that stabilizer. I'm going to slow it down a little bit. I'm going to get this one placed up here. While that one's finishing stitching. And then it should pop over to the second column. And it should start stitching this one down. And then I shall speed it back up. And again, I have my batting just hanging right off the front of the hoop. All right. And like I said, if you don't have batting, you know, that is long like that, you only have to have batting to fit in this space, the 10-inch space. Okay? And you just keep joining them together. Alright, the next stitch will be the 1/4 inch placement line. It'll do a 1/4 inch around both sides to tell you where to place your fabric. Alright, so here's our line for stitching our fabric. And again, I'm doing everything in white. I have a white bobbin. I'm going to quilt it in white again. Now this one is the scroll design that I've been using all along. So this is more of a border scroll. And you'll see when it starts stitching out, you know, that it does look a little different than the quilting scroll. Again, doing a 1/4 inch on each side. Where to place our fabric. And I am going to start my fabric at that corner that I cut off. So I know that, you know, I'm not catching any of it into the I'm not catching the selvage anywhere. I'm gonna lay my fabric down and just let it hang off the front as well. And for the most part, like, the fabric does hug, you know, the batting very well. So usually I don't have to use tape. If you feel more comfortable using tape, then I would say go ahead and put your tape down. Alright, so I'm gonna hit start, and this is going to tack down on the left and right sides of our borders. So it's just tacking down that fabric on the left and right sides. Okay, and the next stitch after this is going to be the actual quilting. So you can see it's just tacking down all of these borders. Alright, so I'm going to start the quilting, and we'll return when the quilting's done, and we'll take a look at it. And then we'll, you know, continue on with our strips and quilting the whole strip. Alright, so it just finished doing the quilting. Let's see if you can kind of see what my swirls look like. So that is the scroll, I believe, is what it's called. So it just did my 10 inches, right? So now I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to take this out of the hoop. I'm going to trim this fabric, the stabilizer away right underneath here, so that I can line it up to the next piece of stabilizer as I load up the next, because I'm going to stitch the same pattern again, right? So I'm just going to take these out of the hoop and put another piece of stabilizer in the hoop and start it again, and then attach these to that item. And I'm just going to do that probably so 10, 20, 30, like at least 4 times for 40 inches. I think that might be enough. I mean, fabric is only like 42 to 43, 44 inches. So we'll see after we do the 4 hoopings how much of it has been quilted to decide if we actually do it a 5th time. But this way I'm quilting both of the borders at the same time, or all 4 I should say, on a continuous line. Alright, so here was what I cut away, right? I cut the stabilizer at the top, I re-hooped, and then I have this all together. I have all the rest of my fabric just hanging off here. So I just stitched out the placement line for my batting. So I'm going to slide this piece back up here because I want to line them up again, right? But what I am going to do is I'm going to take these apart a little bit. I'm going to throw the fabric up there first. And make sure I have that all pulled back real nice. And then now I want to line up where my batting needs to go and where the top of the square is. I can see my vertical lines and my horizontal lines on the stabilizer. And I'm just trying to line it all up, just like we did with the little ones. These are just a little bit bigger. So I'm tacking down the batting on the one. And I think my second one is about ready and lined up. When it gets back up there, it should jump over and do the my second strip of batting and tack it down. And I think I'm good. Yep, there we go. All right. So I'm just tacking this batting down. And then the next strip, the next thing it's going to stitch is your 1/4 inch on either side, right? So you know where to place your fabric. And then I'll pull the fabric down. It'll tack the fabric down on each side. And then last thing is the quilting. So that's kind of where we're at. So let's just let this stitch, and then I'll do the 1/4 inch on each side of the fabric just to make sure I can do straight lines. It just makes it easier if you have the line there, so I'm just going to stitch it out. Alright, next step. Show me where to place my fabric. Again, just a little bit bigger than the rectangle you currently have. It's showing you the 1/4 inch on each side that you should have around the batting. And again, this is so the batting's not in the seam allowance. So it'll help us when we go to put it together. Alright, again, showing me my 1/4 inch placement line for my fabric on the second strip that I have that we are quilting. Alright, so now I'm just going to pull my one piece of fabric down. And I want to cover up that batting. And I'm making sure that it's nice and flat up there, and I'm not getting like a bulge or, you know, missing some fabric where it's getting caught underneath and making a pucker or anything like that, right? So there's one. And when you do pull the fabric, again, it really does like to like hug on to the batting that's underneath there. So it usually stays in place very well. So the whole issue is, did I place it right? And I'm just making sure that like when I'm right here where our seams are up there, that it's laying, you know, flat. Okay, gonna hit start, and now it's gonna go down both sides, the left and right side of the strips, and it's tacking them down in the seam allowances. And then once that's done, we will be quilting these again. And I'm just going to do this whole step 2 more times, because I believe we at least want to quilt these 4 times based on my size using this 10 inch. If you're using a smaller size, you're probably going to quilt them like 5 times. Alright. I just think the quilting, when you quilt it with the batting in it, it does make the flange to me look a lot nicer. Alright, so I'm gonna let it stitch up the other side, and I'm gonna I'll go ahead and start the next step, which is the quilting part, and we'll be back. Alright, so I just finished quilting the second part. Now I don't know if you can see, but here's where the first one stopped, right? Because you could see my stabilizer right there. So that's where the first one stopped. So basically, there's like just a little, it doesn't like continuous touch all the circles, but there's a little space there, and that little space is just fine. So this space here is where you would make an adjustment let's say, you know, based on how far you need it, your borders, whether this little space here should be more than 1/4 inch, less than 1/4 inch, or touching, and that could make it look more consistent. But right now, I think that's good with like my finger kind of right there in that space. I don't, you know, you're not really going to know that it's not continuous because it looks like it's continuous quilting. But I just want you to know that, you know, it doesn't touch. Like these lines do not touch. And that's fine. It's going to be just fine when we're done with this flange. So I just did the second one. So I'm going to do the same thing as I did before. I'm going to remove it from the hoop. Right? I'm going to trim really close to the bottom here, because I like to trim this stabilizer away. But I've been leaving this stabilizer together on this side because I can get that into my smaller hoop. I have a real tiny hoop, the Janome. I have a hoop that's like 3 inches by only like 1.5 inches. So this fits in there, and that's for like doing collars and small items. It's just a really tiny hoop. The other thing is, on my Viking machines, I have what's called a spring hoop. And that does like a circle. And the circle's like as big as a jar, like a jelly jar lid. That's about what the circle is. And it really helps get into smaller places. Again, doing small emblems or just a monogram on something. So these little pieces of stabilizer, that's where I use these pieces of stabilizer. All right, I hate to waste stabilizer. I hate to throw away some, you know, big pieces of it. So I will try to use that in when I start doing my smaller projects. I usually just roll the stabilizer up and put it in a bag and store it in, you know, another place where my smaller hoops are, because I don't normally use the small hoops, but when I get them out, I just get all that stabilizer out and start using it all up. So another thing I do in the small hoops, there are some small designs that you can do in the small hoops. They are like earrings, small lace designs. But of course, the lace designs and things like that, you probably have to use the wash away. But, you know, either way, it's still, you know, I like to conserve my stabilizer. So I'm going to hoop up my third one of doing the quilting, right? Because I still think I need to do 4, and I'll start that and we'll be back. All right, so here I am again. I just did my third set of towers here, so to speak. I have all the 2 stitched, and then I folded up the 2 pieces right up on top of the ones that were stitched. And now again, I did my batting placement line, and I want to try and line these up. And then I just want the batting. I want to keep the fabric up there. So I'm going to bring the batting down, and again, I'm draping the extra batting right on down and over the hoop. And let's get that fabric up there and out of my way. So, and I'll just, you know, eyeballing it right now, trying to line it up. Because, you know, to me, once I get the first one lined up, usually they'll both line up okay because of the fact that I left them attached to the stabilizer. And the stabilizer, for the most part, is pretty taut in my hoop. All right. So I'm tacking it down. Done tacking down the first one, it'll swap over and it'll tack down that second one. And again, the next step would be stitching number 3 of that quilting file, which is going to show me where to place the fabric. So it'll do a 1/4 inch on each side. Then I'll tack down my fabric and then I'll quilt it. So I'm just doing this process over and over and over. And, you know, we started with the flange, right? It was just that the flanges aren't as thick. You know, they were only 1.5 inches wide. These are 2 inches wide. So this is basically the process that I do when I'm actually stitching using the embroidery machine, right, to stitch my borders. Because I'll stitch the borders out first before I attach them to my pillow. So we'll be back when my quilting's done, and you'll see, you know, what it looks like after 3 have been quilted. Alright, I just finished with my 3rd set of quilting, and I have, you know, a little bit more left. So I'm gonna load this up, and we're gonna do it a 4th time, and we'll see what's left. Alright, I'm getting ready to lay the batting down for the 4th time. Alright. So I stitched my placement lines out. Okay, I'm gonna hit start so I can tack this batting down. I think I placed it pretty nicely. It's still not gonna get all the batting quilted. I'm gonna have, you know, what, like a 4-inch piece here, maybe a 3-inch piece here on the one side that did not get quilted yet. I mean, it's close. Just looking at my 2nd piece of batting on here when I get up around that corner and it starts to do this one. I just want to make sure that it's laying flat up here. Alright, so this is the 4th time that I am quilting, you know, this width of fabric that we're calling the flange. Alright, so you can see I tacked my batting down. I did the 1/4 inch stitch of where to place my fabric. I placed my fabric down over top that batting, and now I'm just tacking down my fabric on the sides. Alright, and then I'm just going to do this 4th set of quilting, and we'll see how it goes. Alright, so I just did my 4th hooping. Alright, and when I measure this, I have 38 inches of quilting, and I need more than 38. So there is almost 5 inches here that I need to quilt. So I'm measuring from that one where I stopped out, and it's roughly 5. I could probably wing it at a 4-inch. So I need to go get a 2x4-inch design of this same quilting pattern. And the reason I'm going to do that is I only need this little piece up here. I don't want it to stitch all the way down the whole row. And in order for me to do this little piece at the start, I would be putting this way up at the top of my hoop, you know, possibly wasting some stabilizer and things like that. So I'm going to go see if there is a scroll design that is 2x4 and add that right here, because it'll have the same quality, aesthetics, you know, the shape, the size is all going to be the same, but it's going to fit they're going to make a design finish right in this one side here. So I'm going to go look at that, see if they have one out there. If they don't, then I'll be back to just stitching the very top and then stopping my quilting so I don't quilt just on a stabilizer. There's no reason for me just to do that. All right, so they only had a 2x7. So I just left the 2x10s here. They're set up already. I just went ahead and left that. So I went ahead and trimmed my batting again, right close to the bottom, or my stabilizer. Flip both of these up, and you can see I still need some batting for to finish quilting all of those. So I'm gonna line these up at the top where they should go. I'm going to pull this piece of batting down that I have. Because I do want them to get tacked down. Now I could trim this batting off. So let's see what I have here. So I have a piece of batting that would go across both of them. And what I want the batting to be is as wide as my fabric. So let's see. So that is as wide as my fabric. So what you can do is I can trim these two off. Again, I'm just trimming the batting. I'm not cutting the fabric or anything like that. I'm just trimming the batting off here. And now what I will do, instead of lining these up right now, I'm not going to do that yet. I'm going to line my batting up and just lay it across both. I'm going to tack these down, and I don't care that it stitches down here. So I could like stop the machine and advance it till it gets to over here. However you would like to do that. And then I will trim this batting close to the stitch line, right? Just so the batting's not in the seam allowance. Because see, when it gets down to here, I don't care that it keeps going down that all the way down, right? Because, you know, I'm not doing anything down there. So if I want to save stitches, I'm just going to advance it till it comes back up this side here. And start stitching again just to tack the batting down on this side. Then I'll do the same thing with this one when it comes to that. So as you can see, I just stitched the batting down and I cut it, right? I trimmed it on each side, took the middle of batting out, and now I'm stitching the placement line for the fabric. All right, because I still want to quilt the rest of my fabric that's on the end of my flange border fabric. So once it shows me where to place my fabric, then I'm back to doing what I was going to do originally. But remember, I just didn't have enough batting. So I'm going to be lining these up again on the hoop. And we're going to tack down this fabric. And I can, you know, butt up the two pieces of batting together and get them all lined up. If you want to tape it in place, you can tape it in place. You know, and again, I want my fabric to be, you know, flat. I wanted to cover up the 1/4 inches around both sides. And then what it's going to do is it's going to tack down the two long sides of our fabric. And again, I really don't care that it goes all the way down, but that's fine. I'm just letting it go for right now. And all I want to do is make sure that when it starts stitching back up on this side, that my foot does not catch underneath, right, this fabric, that I really tack down the fabric. All right, I'm going to pause it because I didn't pull this one down yet. I wanted to get the first one laid in and make sure these are nice and flat and the batting up here is touching and things like that. And now I'll hit start, so it'll finish tying that one off, and then it'll come over and it'll stitch this second one down. All right. So this is the whole thing with the clear blue tiles, and block by block is, you know, it's in certain sizes and only those sizes. And they will tell you don't resize these blocks to make it exact, because then you're going to change the aspect ratio of the swirls and things like that. So I'm going to start stitching. It's going to start the swirl up here and we'll see how far, but I'm going to let it fill all the fabric, even though this is a little bit of the selvage edge. I'm not going to worry about that. But there's no reason for me to let it continue down here. I can stop it at that point and just skip those stitches, cut it, and then start again on the next column. So I think it's going to be able to do 2 scrolls and maybe partial of a third, and I'm going to let it do that just in case I need it. Remember, I still have enough fabric that I can cut another strip if I really need another strip. And so see that where it's going to start going off? I don't need any more done. So I'm going to cut, because now I'm going to travel basically my needle. It's going to skip all these stitches down here until we get to the top of the second border that's up there. And once it skips, starts skipping so many, when it skips, you know, more than 5 or 6, then it goes to skipping in 10s and then 20s, and then mine goes in 100s. And of course it just skipped a little too far. So there we go. And I'm going to go back so that I'm back now at stitch number 1 at the top of this column. And we're going to quilt that one. So that's basically how I do it. And I'm just skipping stitches, you know, one at a time, and then it starts doing 10s, 20s, 40s, 100s. If you go too far, okay, just back it up. So again, this one should stitch like 1.5 of the swirls. But at least the swirls aspect ratios are the same. It's not going to look like you shrunk this one in here. And that's what we don't want. But I did want to finish quilting as much of this blue flange fabric as I have, just in case I need it. Otherwise, I'm just going to have to set it all up again on the embroidery machine, and I'd rather just not do that. So if I don't have to, I don't want to. All right, so I am done now, as far as I know, quilting everything. All right, we quilted the inner borders. We quilted and we did the embroidery on all of our embroidery squares, right? So we have all the squares ready. I have not cut anything. Remember, when I finished with my squares, I just kept loading the next embroidery design in, loading the next embroidery design in, because I told you I just like to cut all of mine at one time. So what you're going to see next is I'm going to get all of my embroideries out and ready. I'm going to go find my cutting tools, so my rotary cutter, maybe my scissors, but also I have the pop rulers. You could use rulers, you could use squares, you know, anything like that that helps you cut these embroideries down to the Kimberbell size is what you're going to need. And we're going to do that all at one time. So I'm actually going to move over to the other table and give me a lot of space to move around. And I'll refer back to each page as we go in cutting each block and getting it ready to do our final assembly of this pillow, because right now I feel we are done with all of our embroidery. So all we're going to be doing now is just the 1/4 inch seams and stitching it all together. So we're almost done, but I'm going to do my actual cutting of all the blocks in one video. So if you wanted to watch how I do it, you can watch. Thanks.